Yeah, good afternoon, all of you. Welcome to the 6th edition of the Amsterdam International Water Week 2021. We are delighted to have you all joining this afternoon to listen to three very inspiring speakers who will talk about a topic which is also close to my heart, risk-informed financial mechanisms for water challenges. It's a privilege to introduce to you today three speakers, Kathleen Dominique, Juan Bofill, and Dayna Linley-Jones. Three speakers from actually around the world who are going to share with us some of their excellent work in the field of finance. During the Amsterdam International Water Week, our main theme is about highlighting blue-green deals with integrated solutions. And of course, the importance of financial systems and tools within this area is absolutely crucial. So it's a very big pleasure to introduce to you today our first speaker. Kathleen is a policy analyst at the Organization of Economical Cooperation and Development, where she is leading the work on water financing as the project manager of Roundtable on Financing Water. At the OECD, she has led work on water resources allocation, on groundwater allocation, and water and climate change adaptation. She also has led the country-focused environmental performance reviews and work on biodiversity policy reform. And prior to joining the OECD, Kathleen worked on climate change at the Institute of Sustainable Development and International Relations and as a senior associate at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Today, Kathleen is only able to join us for the first half an hour because she will change directly after this session into the COP26 Water and Climate Pavilion, where she's going to give another important contribution to the audience over there. So it's a very big honor to hand over to you, Kathleen, and to share with us about Innovative Financing Knowledge Hub, where you have played a very important role. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Menno, and thank you to the organizers for the opportunity to connect with you today. It's a real privilege and pleasure to do so. And indeed, I'm really pleased to be able to share with you an initiative that we have just started to develop. So this is very new, and indeed one of the innovative contributions that OECD is making on the water financing agenda. I hope you can share my screen. Please let me know if that's not the case. Yeah, I'm going to jump right in. So for the past couple of years, just by way of context, for the past couple of years, OECD has been focused more and more on the finance and investment dimension of our work on water. And this is one of the ways that we've done that is through the establishment of a roundtable on financing water, which is a joint initiative of the OECD, the government of the Netherlands, the World Water Council, and the World Bank. And what we've seen through the course of that roundtable, it's really a dedicated platform to bring together people working in the finance community and also working on water issues, is that we see a lot of knowledge and a lot of diverse examples of financing approaches that contribute to water security, but many of them are fragmented across various institutions, across various experts and countries. And so this initiative to establish the Global Observatory on Financing Water Supply, Sanitation, and Water Security really emerged from the recognition that there was an opportunity to more systematically document, share, and encourage peer-to-peer learning about financing instruments, mechanisms, and business models. Also document, share, and encourage peer-to-peer learning around the enabling environments for investment. We know that this is absolutely critical in order to mobilize finance. So that's everything to do with the policies, regulations, institutional arrangements related to the water sector and beyond. And then we also saw that there was an interest to look at ways to highlight and enhance thought leadership and do horizon scanning for new developments, because in the course of our engagement on the roundtable and our other work, we've seen that there are a lot of new and emerging approaches and initiatives, and to have a place where these are documented and shared, we thought could be extremely relevant. So we've been doing a lot of homework in terms of looking at other knowledge hubs and observatories on all kinds of topics, things that are hosted at the OECD, like the Artificial Intelligence Observatory or the Observatory on Public Sector Innovation. We're also inspired by the G20 water platform. Some of you might be aware that last year the Saudi presidency put water in its own right on the G20 agenda for the first time ever, and established a G20 dialogue on water that allows an opportunity to share best practice among G20 countries. And in fact, the Italian presidency continued that. But we also have a lot of other examples, including observatories on financing, local finance, and so on and so forth. So we've been reviewing these to try to figure out where best we can find our niche and what can be most useful from the point of view of potential users. In terms of the scope, what we're planning to do will be focused on really water security broadly, so everything to do with water supply and sanitation, but also water resource management, managing water risks, irrigation, hydropower, really that range of topics that fit under that broad heading of water security. We also see there's a real opportunity for a global focus. So of course, focusing on OECD countries, but also emerging economies, developing economies. And we know that the contextual factors really influence the types of finance that can really be best brought to bear in those contexts. What we want to do is really share those best practices. So looking at, case studies of innovative and proven financing models, also business models and revenue streams. One thing we often hear is a lament about the lack of bankable projects. So how best can policymakers create policies to then generate more attractive either revenue streams or risk management approaches to make those types of projects more viable? And that, of course, gets us towards the enabling environment. So that's what we'd like to focus on. And in terms of target audience, we have a range of potential stakeholders in mind, everything from governments at multiple levels. We know local level is extremely important, but also finance ministries, and considering the role of public finance, that's very important in the sector. Water service providers, other public authorities with responsibility for water management, obviously importantly financial institutions, and there we see really the whole range of types of financial institutions involved in different ways across the spectrum. And then there are a lot of other actors at the international level doing quite interesting things, whether it's NGOs or foundations or donors and development actors setting up new funds and trying out new instruments. Now, as we mentioned in the beginning, the whole rationale behind this is to have a one-stop shop knowledge hub, if you will. And here's where the type of information we think we can populate on that platform, including the case studies, as I mentioned, also considering documenting country profiles with key data, trends, and policies that help understand the financing context. So not just the type of financing mechanisms, but also the context. That's quite important. Tools and guidance. We'll also be working on, in parallel to this, developing a diagnostic tool about the enabling environment for investment that could be then applied at country level. So that's a type of tool that could be also populated on the observatory. There's also a lot of information about policy guidance on how to strengthen the enabling environment for investment. And then looking at insights and perspectives. So thinking about, how models, financing approaches that work well in one context could potentially be adapted and developed and tailored to new contexts. We're interested in government perspectives, but also what's happening on the private finance and the public finance side, where we see some experimentation and new models, as I mentioned. So maybe just coming towards my wrapping up and last points, I mentioned at the very beginning that part of the driving inspiration behind setting up this observatory is the activities that we've had under the Roundtable on Financing Water. And as I mentioned, this is a global platform really that provides a dedicated hub to talk about these issues. We've had about 8 meetings over the past 4 years. The last one we convened focused on how financing water security contributes to climate action, and that was co-convened with the U.S. government. And that's provided us an opportunity then to take some of those key messages and then feed them into some of the discussions at COP26 to make sure that water security is an important element or area or theme on that agenda for mobilizing finance for climate. Finally, just maybe a last quick point around how to disseminate this type of information. You know, we want to set up this observatory. It will be an online platform that should be interactive, etc. But there's also room to, of course, link up with social media, make sure that also that information is disseminated through key reports and publications, through webinars, conferences, and very importantly, the roundtable, which will continue to operate. So let me go ahead and wrap up there, and thank you, of course, for your attention and also for the opportunity to share that with you. I'd be keen to hear any questions or reactions or maybe interest to collaborate with us from any of the participants. So I'll stop there and hand it back to you, Menno.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. I think a very important development to open up the knowledge about finance and bridge basically the information back into the water space. We saw in your presentation that one of the primary objectives of the financing roundtables is to share good practices. Can you share some examples from your experience, which could be an interesting eye-opener for the audience?
Absolutely. I think one of the areas where we've seen a lot of development and interest is in the growth of the use of proceeds bond market. So many people have heard about green bonds and blue bonds. And Menno, you mentioned that obviously one of the themes of the Amsterdam International Water Week is green and blue deals. So this has become an instrument that can raise funds from capital markets, but for specific purposes. And what we see is a couple of things that are very interesting. One is that you have high demand on the investor side, where you see ESG criteria, environment, social, and governance criteria becoming more and more important, especially to institutional investors. So they have a strong appetite for that. And then for issuers, whether those are corporates, whether those are water utilities, whether those are national governments, whether those are munis, municipal governments, they're seeing opportunities then to flag the type of environmentally sensitive and investments that contribute to resilience and water security, and they can raise at very attractive rates, depending on the context, depending on the country, large amounts of finance for those types of investments. Of course, then their obligation is to report back on what they did with the money, but hopefully that should strengthen the credibility of those types of green investments. So that's one example that we're seeing. There are lots of others, so I don't want to take up much time, but I think that's an interesting development.
From your perspective, what would you expect from the water space? Is there some particular call you like to make, or is there some particular offer you can make to the water sector? Is there something from what you like to share with the audience where the water sector should really step up?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, one thing that we see when we've been engaging in the roundtable is that there's a real keen interest from investors who want to get exposed to the water space, who are looking for attractive investment opportunities, and they're not always easy to find. What I would say to the water sector is, one, make sure you're engaging in those kinds of discussions with financiers. You know, join our discussion at the roundtable on financing water and talk about the types of interesting projects that you're launching, how they contribute to resilience, how they contribute to climate action, how they contribute to all these important policy goals. But also, you know, be willing to have a dialogue with investors about how those projects could be structured or designed in order to make them attractive to mobilize that finance. And part of that might be just getting also the public financiers or those who have development finance to think about how they can help de-risk some of those investments that can then help them mobilize additional commercial capital. So that would be my call to the water sector. And also, please, get involved in the observatory. We would love to hear your examples of where you've been successful in mobilizing finance and addressing some of those issues related to the enabling environment.
Yeah, and thank you very much. And probably also engage as early as possible. I think the more you can add from the start of the project development phase, the better it is to bring the different stakeholders and the extensive knowledge you're bringing together basically into the project. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. All the best in Glasgow. We are counting on you to bring all the knowledge and all the lessons learned to all our leaders over there. Good luck with the Water and Climate Pavilion activities, and hope to see you soon. Any questions for Kathleen, either forward us to the chat or use her email address, which you saw on the last slide of her presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And we continue to with another very interesting speaker about a slightly different topic. Juan Bofill is a Master of Science and a civil engineer, which he obtained in the Polytechnic Engineering University of Madrid. Juan is a Master of Business Administration and a Master in Project Management of projects financed by multilateral institutions. Currently, he is working as a senior water engineer in the water management division in the European Investment Bank, EIB, and he is the technical responsible for the water sector portfolio in Latin America, in close cooperation with the AIWW, with the CAF and the World Bank. And during his professional experience of more than 20 years in the private and public sector, he has been in charge of business development and project management, always in the water sector. Currently, you're acting as the secretary of the group ST10, Water and Waste Activities of the Platform of Sustainable Finance, which is currently developing the EU taxonomy. And in the European Investment Bank, he is also co-managing the Clean Oceans Initiative, intended to reduce the plastics and microplastic discharge into the oceans. As a recent publication, he has developed the article Development Solutions, Building a Better Ocean, which you can find on EIB.org. It's a big pleasure to welcome here Juan and to share with us the outlook of the EIB on the new EU taxonomy for water. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Menno. Thank you and good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be here, well, in the distance, but here in the Amsterdam International Water Week. Well, you know that climate change is a fact. We are seeing what's been discussed currently in Glasgow, and the reduction in emissions is absolutely a must. And for the whole economy, including the water sector, of course. We have also to adapt to the climate change, and climate change and adaptation will only happen with sustainable finance. My purpose here today is to briefly, in the time I have, to explain you what the EU Commission is doing in relation to defining what can be considered as sustainable finance. For this, the Commission is preparing what's called the EU taxonomy. And the taxonomy can be defined as a classification system which establishes a list of environmentally sustainable economic activities. Next slide, please. But why a taxonomy? The taxonomy is basically a tool. We know that the critical problem that climate change is creating, it's an enormous challenge, and in order to address it, the EU adopted an action plan, such as the Green Deal. You probably are familiar with it, but has, among other objectives, the reduction in emissions by 55% in 2030, in order to reach the goal that we all want, which is zero emissions by 2050. In order to achieve this, the financing needs to be channeled towards activity that are considered as sustainable. So the taxonomy is a tool for us to identify these activities and guide the capital to the right place. Next slide, please. So for creating this taxonomy, 6 environmental objectives were defined in what was called the taxonomy regulation that entered into force on July 12, 2020. An activity can only be declared as sustainable if it achieves substantial contribution to at least one objective, and does not produce what we call significant harm to the other 5. The objectives were climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, that were already studied, as I will explain later, sustainable use and protection of water resources, transition to a circular economy, pollution prevention and control, and protection and restoration of biodiversity and ecosystems. Next slide, please. The taxonomy is being prepared in 2 phases. The activities that can contribute to the first 2 objectives, such as climate mitigation and adaptation, were already included in what it was called First Delegated Act, that was adopted in June 2021, and it's expected to be approved by the Council, because the Parliament has recently approved it, before December 2021. The activities related to the other 4, that the activities that have substantial contribution to the other 4, are being prepared, and the second delegated act will probably be published in March 2022, and will be adopted during the rest of the year and enter into force in early 2023. Next slide, please. Okay, who is defining the platform? Basically, the platform is the taxonomy. Sorry, the taxonomy is being defined by what we call the platform. The platform is a technical platform created, which all members from all this from the sectors, from financial institutions, from the industry, academia, civil society. For example, NGOs are represented here, and in this case, for example, EIB is member of this platform. So this technical working group will do recommendations, will create a set of recommendations in a report, and will submit it to the Commission. The Commission will take it and will make it their own assessment and publish it. So the work done by the technical working group is not final, but it's a very valuable recommendation. Next one, please. So how does the taxonomy looks like and will look like? At the end of the day, we're talking about a list of activities. So all the economy has been screened basically using the NAES codes. So each of them with its corresponding criteria for achieving substantial contribution and avoiding significant harm. We will see later that the water sector is already represented here. Next one, please. The criteria has to fulfill certain conditions, such as being science-based. So it means they have to be based on evidence, cannot be an opinion simply. The criteria must use existing work, considering that the resources were not added to study additional or do additional research during this time that the platform works. The criteria has to be dynamic, since the taxonomy is expected to be adapted in time. So in 3 years, the taxonomy will be adapted according to what is happening in the technical perspective. Have to be valid in terms of our CapEx, so has to be valid for new projects, for example, and has to be also valid for operations, for OpEx. And more important, has to be easy to use. Taxonomy will be used for not only by technical people, engineers or economists, but also by funds, bankers, etc. Next slide, please. Who will have to use the taxonomy once it's in force? Because we are talking about law, it's a regulation. So according to the taxonomy regulation, it will have to be used by financial market participants offering financial products, large companies operating in the EU when they are required to provide non-finance statements, for example, corporate responsibility, and the EU member states when leveling, for example, corporate bonds. Next one, please. I'm going to skip this one because it's we don't have time enough. Yes, next one, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, the first delegated act was already published and adopted, the one dealing with climate action mitigation and adaptation. So water sector is already included there, represented there, the activities, and I had the chance to participate in a technical working group that proposed the criteria during 2019. So let's take a quick look to the water activities. Let's move to the next slide, please. Okay, so the activities, in order to have a substantial contribution to climate change mitigation, the activities include, for example, water supply, new and renewable, wastewater treatment as well, new and renewable, and anaerobic digestion of sewage sludge. These were the 3 activities that were included in the first delegated act. You can have a deep look, of course, in the document or in the it's online. All the first delegated act is online. But for example, for construction and operation of water collection or water supply systems, the taxonomy regulates or says that if the energy consumption of the system is less or equal than 0.5 kilowatts per cubic meter produced of water supply, then the activity of operating that system is considered as taxonomy aligned, so achieving a substantial contribution to mitigation. For renewal of systems, which is mostly the case in the EU, the activity can be declared aligned, for example, a renewal of a water supply system, if the energy consumption is reduced by at least by 20%, a reduction of 20% in the system. In relation to wastewater and collection, next slide, sorry, I forgot. In relation to wastewater and collection and treatment, we have similar cases. We have similar cases when for construction of new activities, or new wastewater treatment plants, for example, there's a link in relation to the energy consumption. So there are thresholds for energy consumption. See, if the wastewater treatment plant achieves to be under this threshold, then the operation of this plant or the construction of this plant, wastewater treatment plant, is considered aligned with the taxonomy. In rehabilitation, is the same. Renewal of wastewater treatment plants, the idea is to reduce the energy consumption by 20%. So then activity is considered aligned. Next slide, please. And in relation to anaerobic digestion, was included there. Anaerobic digestion is included as such, as a way to mitigate climate change, since it can capture methane efficiently. This methane can be reused as energy consumption or heat. So this one was included in a more granular way. Next one, please. In relation to climate change adaptation, because there's specific criteria for this, all the activities have the similar criteria, which basically is that the climate risk has to be addressed in the design, right, depending on the economic life of the activity, 10 years, 30 years. So the climate projections have to be considered like that. And now I'm finishing now. Next one, please. This will be the last slide. So what we're doing now is basically working on the second delegated act, which is we're dealing with the other 6 objectives. It was a publication of the criteria in the 3rd of August. This was already concluded, this criteria, and the public consultation was already finished. And we are now addressing, as I'm the secretary of the technical working group 10, dealing with water and waste, and we're dealing with the public comments. And the idea is that this will be finalized by the end of the year. So next year, this second delegated act will be published, and there will be, of course, time for anybody to give comments to this. So I hope that this was useful to you. Thank you very much, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Juan. Very, very interesting presentation about the new EU taxonomy. Maybe a question from our side. How are the international financial institutions responding to the EU taxonomy? What is, for example, the European Investment Bank doing in this regard?
Okay, thank you for the question, Menno. Well, in terms of impact of the taxonomy in the IFIs and the green finance as well, I will say embrace for impact. That will be the main summary, because I think we believe that the taxonomy, if finally approved, because there's a lot of political influence, but we know that the delegated acts will be approved, maybe not today, maybe tomorrow, but this taxonomy will have a critical influence on how we see sustainable finance. The whole economy and the financial markets will now have activities that are already screened with the technical criteria. So this will tell us what is sustainable finance and what is not sustainable finance, which is also very important. And of course, likely the markets will direct the financing to at least a significant part of the financing to these activities. No? Mm-hmm. Just as an example, we already know that activities with strong contribution to climate change mitigation, and this is now being discussed in Glasgow, how to do more, how to do more in order to reach the targets that we have. And the AIB is not indifferent to this. On the contrary, as I mentioned before, the AIB has been participating in the platform since the beginning, giving the expertise, technical expertise, and also financial expertise. No? In December 2020, the bank approved the Climate Bank roadmap, and among other commitments, what the bank agreed and committed was to increase the financing to by at least 50%, to that 50% of the financing by 2025 has to be aligned to the taxonomy. So it will be a tendency, a trend that will happen, and it's true that this is only being prepared by the Commission. But for example, the AIB will apply it also in the investments outside the EU. So this will have also an influence outside the EU. Okay. So basically, this is what I meant. I think it will be critical, the influence that will have in IFIs and other institutions.
And then, of course, I guess that also the criteria and the KPIs you are developing will also be integrated in the observatory of the OECD, which Kathleen introduced to us.
Yes, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Of course, there will be a dialogue on. Yeah.
It's very unfortunate, but I have to keep a sharp eye on the time as well.
Sure.
So thank you very much for your contribution. So from Luxembourg, we're shifting gears to Toronto, and it's really a global event today, and it's a big pleasure to introduce to you Dayna. She is a Stewardship Services Director at Sustainalytics. It's a great word. Since 2008. Dayna has had various roles at Sustainalytics, a provider of high-quality analytical, environmental, social, and governance ESG research, ratings, and data to institutional investors and companies. She's currently leading the Localized water management thematic engagement, where she is dialogues with corporates operating in a shared water basin on behalf of the investor. In her previous roles, she was responsible for overseeing ESG ratings research, ensuring quality assurance, and conducting best of sector analysis. In 2012 and 13, Dayna was named Best Environmental and Social Analyst in the Independent Research in Responsible Investment Survey, the IRRI survey. Her previous experience spans corporate policy writing, environmental auditing, and hydrogeology-focused consulting. I know that you have a very big presentation and interesting presentation for us. It's early days in Toronto. The sun is coming up. It's an honor to hand over to you. The floor is yours.
I apologize about my background, but yeah, the sun is coming up here. So I'm hoping to tie in a little bit about what Juan and Kathleen were actually speaking about. But in order to understand the financial mechanism that I'm going to share with you here, which is shareholder engagement, you need to understand a little bit of background on what Sustainalytics does. So that's the company that I work for. Next slide, please. So we're an ESG research and rating agency. So this means that we rate and rank companies on their sustainability performance. So we use only environmental, social, and governance indicators, so that's E, S, and G, to inform our rankings. And we've been doing this for over 25 years. So we are not new, even though the world is sort of waking up to ESG. So many of the, say, blue or green or socially responsible financial products that you see on the market today are actually underpinned by the research of Sustainalytics. So we have a long track record with ESG issues, including water. And now that we have sort of different parts within our company, and we're all focused on helping investors to integrate ESG, to helping investors use these ESG factors in their decision-making process. And so I used to work on the rating side, but now I'm in engagement. So engagement means I talk to companies about environmental, social, and governance issues on behalf of institutional investors like pension funds. And so as a company, we've been having these tough conversations for about 30 years. So we're not new to this, I guess is what I wanted to share. Next slide. Good. So engagement or investor stewardship, it's all names for shareholders, which are the owners of these publicly traded companies, reaching out to the companies to discuss issues. And so I'm going to focus here on what we call thematic engagement, or what we refer to internally as proactive engagements. So Sustainalytics is a third-party engager. It means that investors hire us to talk to companies for them. So Sustainalytics is not a direct shareholder. but an investor wants to make an impact in a certain area. So perhaps that's a specific SDG, perhaps it's an area like modern slavery or taxation, and in this case, it's on localized water management. So the investors want to make an impact on this topic, so they hire someone like Sustainalytics to go and speak to companies to try to raise the bar on these issues. So being a third-party engager really means that we can sort of bring a significant investor footprint to a company conversation. If one company went to speak to a company, they only have sort of the size of their holdings together. For my engagement, I actually have 10 different investors, and for other engagements, we may have, say, up to 15 investors. And so it just brings a larger pool of assets. It brings more money behind these conversations. And so we're hoping to sort of gather more attention from the companies if we're bringing more assets to the conversation. And so as if we look at our global clients on engagement, we have about 80 investment clients, and it's about 2.5 trillion euros in assets under management. So what happens is Sustainalytics does all the legwork and all the clients have access to all the information. So what we're trying to do is sort of work collaboratively and really leverage the power of ownership with these companies. Next slide. Yeah, so this is just a bit of a slide on, it's our philosophy. So the main takeaway here is just that we're not activists, we're not threatening the companies with naming or shaming, and all of our progress and findings is only shared with the clients, it's not publicly available. So what we try to take a collaborative and realistic approach. We really want to have, deep conversations with these companies and understand their challenges. And we also know that change at a corporation doesn't happen overnight, but we do push for meaningful change, and we let the companies know that their investors want them to make changes on these topics, such as water. So next slide, please. So why are we engaging on localized water management, and sort of what are we trying to accomplish? So I guess the first thing to understand is that all of our engagements are investor driven, meaning that there was demand from our investor clients to advance on this topic. So the purpose of this specific engagement is to have positive impacts on water management and stewardship at both a company and a basin level. So we aim to improve awareness at all levels of the company of the importance and benefits of adapting water management to the local context, both from a financial materiality perspective, as well as a water as a public good perspective. So we encourage enhanced company-wide appreciation and management of water as a material and strategic risk and opportunity. And we also encourage improved disclosure. We want the company sharing more information about what they're doing on water. This slide also mentions appropriate management responses, and those words are chosen very carefully. We do have a collaborative approach. It's not a prescriptive approach to engagement. Our contacts at these companies really know their operations the best. So we don't advocate for a specific list of best practices, but we do share information and we discuss potential approaches with the companies. So we can talk to the company about, did you know your competitors are recycling wastewater? We haven't seen any disclosure. Have you thought about doing this? What are some of the barriers that you're experiencing to this? And try to share some of our knowledge and try to cross-pollinate ideas between industries as well. On a basin level, we intend to highlight collaborative opportunities to improve water security. We know that collaboration and basin level efforts are the most cost-effective and efficient way to tackle water risks and impacts. We also know that's really hard. So as I said, we're just trying to cross-pollinate and help these companies sort of connect with each other in the hope that they'll be able to work together to get a project off the ground. And then all of our engagements are 3 years long. And so to the extent possible within those 3 years, we hope to contribute to tangible outcomes on the ground. We'd like to see, a project taking place within the basin, although that's a pretty lofty goal. So we'll see how far we get with that. But we do try to target, say, visible impact for our investors. Next slide, please. Sure. So the localized water management engagement actually builds on a previous 3-year engagement that we had. So the first one concluded in 2019, and we had a couple of conclusions. So the ones that I want to share with you is that in the companies that we talked to in the first round, they were aware of the need for integrated water resources management, but they acknowledged it was really hard to do. The companies, in some cases, they acknowledged that collaborating was necessary, that it was efficient, and that it was cost effective, but it was really rare. We do see companies collaborating with, say, governments and NGOs, but much less collaborating with each other. And the first engagement also showed that companies that actually engaged and collaborated with Sustainalytics did show greater improvements in our metrics than those that chose not to engage. So based on the outcomes from our first engagement, then we've launched our second engagement, and this one is actually focused on what we say is localized water management instead of sort of water management as a whole at the company. And as this audience understands, I'm sure that water security challenges are really experienced at the local level, at the basin level. And so that the companies need to understand and mitigate facility level risks, not just corporate level risks. Good. So I guess from a company perspective, it's really important to ensure that the people that we're talking to, especially senior level management, that they understand that water is not just the next carbon, and that water really needs to be focused on local actions, that these are actually essential in water stress regions. So this slide's also showing how we're engaging. So we engage with a sort of a discussion point framework, and this framework has a dual aim. It encourages companies to both improve their overarching and their site-specific water management approaches. And I can share that each conversation with these companies is unique, but the backbone of the conversations is the same. It's all based on these 6 discussion points. I guess as an example, say under water governance, we'd be asking, how is water embedded in the company's long-term strategy? Are there water-related goals and governance systems set up? Can you share those? Are those publicly available? Is the company evaluating and mitigating water risks in its value chain? These are the types of questions that we're asking the companies, and then we sort of dig a little bit deeper and try to understand what is a system the company has set up, and is that a good system? Can it be improved? Or if the company hasn't done this yet, then why not? Are they aware of the risk? Maybe there is no risk in this area. And then our engagement is actually focused on localized water management in 2 basins. And so it is the Vaal Basin in South Africa and the Tietê Basin in Brazil. So we're engaging with approximately 10 companies that operate in each basin and asking them all sorts of questions about their operations in those basins, and if they're collaborating in those basins and what their governance systems are within those basins. Good, next slide. Yeah, so then what is the intended result? The result is sort of twofold. I would say it's to decrease risk and therefore preserve valuation, which makes the sort of investors and owners happy. And the second is to make an impact within the local basins, which also aligns with the investor goals. It's a big ask. I'd say we're just getting started down this path, but I think it's a good way to make progress. Good. Menno, can I pass it back to you? I know we only have a few minutes left. So
thank you very much. I think this clearly shows that you are helping different stakeholders to really make the right choices on sustainable water management. How do you connect shareholder goals with for example, SDG 6 targets? How does this help in addressing the water crisis?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, and I think the thing to keep in mind here is that the investors are aligned with SDG 6 because they are also doing their own reporting on how they are advancing SDG 6. And so the investors can't necessarily advance SDG 6 unless the companies that they own are advancing it. So this is just how the investors try to, actively bring the companies along with their own goals. And I think for me, the interesting thing about investor engagement is that the incentives are aligned. The investors own the companies and they want to see progress, and the companies also want to see progress and preserve their own valuation and shareholder and share values. So I just see the 2 sides sort of moving together, and if they're both aligned on a similar topic such as water, then all the better for SDG 6.
How long will it take before you can serve the whole world?
We're taking it 1 basin at a time.
Okay, so what is the next basin after the 2 basins you're taking care of today in Africa and in Brazil?
Yeah, so one thing we're finding within our thematic engagements is that water is a continuing topic. Some of our topics we engage once, make progress, and then that sort of falls off the agenda. But this is our second 3-year engagement on water, and there is significant investor interest in it. We're also seeing a lot of interest in sort of the links with water and biodiversity and the links with water and climate change. And so we actually have other engagements running right now on, say, forests and food that are also tackling SDG 6. And so we're trying to figure out what are the angles, what are the companies that we can really target to sort of I would say, improve the base, bring the base up. So we don't just engage with, say, the top risk companies. We're not just talking to, say, beverage companies with this engagement. We're also talking to, say, pharma companies and chemical companies and some other companies that aren't known as being as progressive. And I can share some of our companies are really at a basic level with their water management. And I think this engagement is just showing them that investors are interested in this. It helps the, say, water people internally at the company show that there's external interest in these topics. And then they can use that leverage internally to say, I've got 10 investors on the phone that are asking why we're not, don't have a better water efficiency number. How can I share this information?
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're reaching the end of today's session, which I believe has been very, very informative. We started in Paris with Kathleen sharing their observatory initiative to basically bring all the different stakeholders together and sharing best practices. Juan, who shared with us the latest developments on the EU taxonomy, basically providing criteria and KPIs on which water activities in the future need to operate. And you, Dayna, are sharing with us your Sustainalytics, basically a toolbox and a process to help investors as well as cities, utilities, industrial end users, and all other stakeholders in water-rich areas to take the right decision and to secure their sustainable water use in the future. I think all in all, thank you very much, all speakers today, all participants, to enjoy this very informative session. And at the Amsterdam International Water Week, we continue on our online program today. We have a lot more interesting speakers and topics this afternoon. And of course, we also would like to invite you for the closing together with the Mayor of Rotterdam and Veronica Manfredi on behalf of one of the Director Generals on behalf of the EU. And for now, thank you very much. And we hope you have been inspired by all the different presenters today in our collective efforts to develop blue-green solutions and contribute to a more sustainable and resilient water future. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you in very soon. And for our contributors, thank you very much. All the best in Canada, in Luxembourg, and in Glasgow today. All right.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.